This podcast contains graphic descriptions of violence and disturbing content related to real-life events, which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome back, everyone. We're diving deep today into a world that's often whispered about, but rarely understood. The dark web. Yeah, the dark web. And get this. We're going to go beyond the headlines, beyond the cybercrime and all that, to explore the unexpectedly wholesome side of this digital underbelly.
It really is fascinating to see how this space, initially created by, the U.S. Department of Defense for Secure Communications, has evolved into this multifaceted, almost paradoxical entity.
Yeah, you're telling me. Like the CIA and the New York Times having their own dark websites, that's not exactly the first thing that comes to mind when you hear, dark web, right?
Exactly. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's take a step back. What exactly is the dark web? How is it different from, say, the deep web? These terms get tossed around a lot, but really understanding the distinction, well, it's key.
Right, because it's easy to get them mixed up. Like trying to explain the difference between, let's say, Bitcoin and blockchain. Super confusing at first, but once you get it, it's like, A
perfect analogy. Think of the internet like an iceberg. The tip, the part we see every day, Google searches, favorite news sites, social media, all of that, that's the surface web.
Okay, makes sense. So what's lurking beneath the surface?
Below the surface lies the deep web, a vast repository of data not indexed by those standard search engines. This includes anything behind a login, your email, bank accounts, cloud storage, basically any information that's not publicly accessible. It's not inherently good or bad, just private, like a secret vault, for your digital life.
Okay, so those embarrassing photos from my college days, tucked away safely in my cloud storage, that's deep web territory.
Precisely. Now, within this massive deep web, there's a smaller, intentionally hidden section, and that's the dark web. And to access it, you need specialized tools, like the Tor browser, which anonymizes your connection by routing your traffic through multiple layers of encryption.
Wait, hold on. Routing through multiple layers. I'm picturing data packets just bouncing around like those silver balls in a pinball machine.
That's a fun way to visualize it. It's more like an onion, with layers upon layers of encryption. Each layer peels away as your data travels through the network, making it extremely difficult to trace back to the source.
The onion analogy, I've heard that before. How does this onion-like routing actually work?
Okay, so imagine you're sending a message on the dark web. Your message first gets encrypted and then bounced through a random sequence of these Tor relays, or servers, all around the world. Each relay only knows the previous and the next relay in the chain, not the origin or final destination of your message.
Okay, so it's like a secret relay race for data,
yes,
with each runner like blindfolded, only knowing who to pass the baton to next.
Exactly. And this whole intricate routing process makes it incredibly difficult to trace the path of your data, ensuring your anonymity. This is why the dark web has become a sort of a haven for activities that require that high level of privacy, both good and bad.
Speaking of which, the dark web was initially like a government project, right? So why would we create something that makes it so difficult to track, criminal activity? Seems a bit counterintuitive.
Well, the initial intention was purely for secure communication. The creators at the Department of Defense wanted a way to protect sensitive government communications and intelligence, especially in situations where anonymity was crucial. Think about dissidents under oppressive regimes, whistleblowers risking their careers to expose wrongdoing, or even journalists, protecting their sources.
Okay, yeah. That makes sense. So the CIA having a dark website, as our sources point out, isn't for, spying, but for securely receiving tips or confidential information. Makes you think about the potential for good.
Absolutely. Even major newspapers like the New York Times have a presence on the dark web. It's all about providing a secure platform for anonymous communication, which has valuable applications far beyond just, the realm of crime.
Yeah, it's like a digital shield, for those who need to speak truth to power without fearing the repercussions.
Precisely. But while anonymity can be this powerful tool for good, it can also be exploited for malicious purposes. And unfortunately, the dark web has become a marketplace for a range of, criminal activities.
So let's get real. We've all heard those like horror stories about the dark web, right? The drug markets, the stolen data, all the things you don't even want to talk about.
Yeah.
It's easy to get freaked out, especially when you hear about, those big data breaches like the Ashley Madison hack.
The Ashley Madison case, that was a fascinating one, not just for the kind of the irony of it, right? A dating site for, cheaters getting hacked, but for the the lasting consequences for the people involved, it really brought to light how vulnerable even those seemingly secure platforms can be, and the very real dangers of having your personal information exposed on the dark web.
Yeah, it's not just about the embarrassment, right? It's the identity theft, the potential for like financial ruin even,
Yeah.
and the impact on your reputation. It can be long lasting. I even read that some of those victims from that Ashley Madison hack, they even faced extortion attempts.
Exactly, and that's just one example. Think about stolen credit card info, online banking credentials, even social security numbers. It's all readily available on dark web marketplaces, often for a surprisingly low price. One of our sources, they mentioned that a credit card with a $1,000 balance could go for as little as $150.
That's scary. It makes you think, like, if that kind of information is so easy to get, is there any way to protect yourself at all? Is it just a matter of time before, all our data ends up on the dark web?
It's a valid concern, and it's important not to downplay the threat. But believe it or not, the International Monetary Fund, they offer a kind of interesting perspective on this. Their research suggests that while the scale of dark web crime is concerning, it's still relatively small compared to, global crime overall.
So it's not this all-consuming digital monster that some people make it out to be.
Right. One of our sources, a firm that specializes in cryptocurrency analysis, they found that only about 1% of Bitcoin transactions are actually linked to illegal activities.
Okay, that puts things in perspective.
Mm.
It's not like as widespread as we might think, but still, 1%, that's still a lot of criminal activity.
Yeah.
So what can we do about it? Can we even police a space that's, designed for anonymity?
That's the million-dollar question. It's this constant back and forth between, protecting privacy and combating crime. Law enforcement agencies, they're definitely facing a unique challenge here. But they're not, just sitting back. There have been some fascinating and even controversial tactics that they've used. Did you read about that Dutch police operation where they actually took over a dark web marketplace?
Yeah, that was wild. Talk about going undercover. But it does make you think about the ethics of it all, right? Like,
Yeah.
how far is too far when it comes to, infiltrating these spaces?
Yeah, it's a slippery slope. On the one hand, you have the potential to gather, really crucial intelligence and disrupt these criminal networks. But, on the other hand, there's always the risk of overreach, of infringing on the privacy of, innocent people who might be using the dark web for perfectly legitimate purposes. It's a really complex debate.
And this debate, it's not just theoretical. It's spilling over into the real world. It's impacting things like cryptocurrency regulation.
Mhm.
Governments around the world, they're trying to figure out how to balance, the need for financial innovation with the need to prevent, the misuse of cryptocurrencies.
Yeah.
Especially on the dark web.
It's a good reminder that the dark web, it's not some isolated, digital island. What
Mhm.
happens there, it has real-world consequences. It shapes policies. It influences financial markets. It even impacts how we, as a society, think about privacy and security in the digital age.
So let's bring this back to our listeners for a second. For those of us who aren't, planning on downloading Tor anytime soon, what does all this mean? How does the dark web actually impact, like, our everyday lives?
Here's the thing. Even if you never, ever personally venture onto the dark web, it can still impact you. Remember those data breaches we talked about? Your information, even if you've never visited a dark website in your life, it could already be out there, being traded on those hidden marketplaces. It's something to think about.
Definitely unsettling. So what can we, the non-Tor using public, do to protect ourselves? Should we just be like living in a constant state of paranoia?
No, it's not about paranoia. It's about being proactive, taking those practical steps to safeguard your digital life.
Okay, so give us the actionable advice. I'm all ears.
Okay, so first and foremost, strong, unique passwords. For every single online account you have, I can't stress this enough, and enable two-factor authentication wherever possible. It's like having an extra security guard standing at the door of all your digital accounts.
Okay, that makes sense. But even with strong passwords and 2FA, what about the data that's already out there? Is there any way to know if your info has already been compromised?
That's where services like, Aura's dark web scanner come in. They're constantly scanning those underground marketplaces, looking for your personal information. And they alert you if they find anything.
So it's like a digital detective,
Yeah.
sniffing out your stolen data in the shady back alleys of the internet.
Exactly. And if you do find your information out there, you can, take steps to try to mitigate the risk, like freezing your credit, changing your passwords, reporting any potential identity theft. Knowledge is power. Knowing is half the battle.
So it's about being informed, being aware, and taking those preventative measures.
Yeah.
But beyond the doom and gloom, I want to circle back to this idea of the dark web as a tool for good. We talked about whistleblowers and journalists using it to share information securely, to expose wrongdoing, to hold powerful people accountable.
That's such a crucial aspect of the dark web's complexity. For individuals living under those oppressive regimes or working in environments where speaking out could have, really serious consequences, the anonymity of the dark web can be a lifeline. It lets them share information without fear of, retribution. And that could spark positive change that might not have been possible otherwise.
But it also creates this dilemma, right? That same anonymity that protects, whistleblowers can also protect those with bad intentions. How do we as a society balance those competing interests?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And there's no easy answer. It's an ongoing debate, one that will likely continue as the dark web evolves and its role in society becomes even more complex. Do the benefits of anonymous truth-telling outweigh the risks of enabling criminals? It's a tough one.
It's almost philosophical, isn't it? The dark web is this mirror reflecting both the best and the worst parts of humanity. A digital space where the lines between good and evil, right and wrong, they just get blurred.
Exactly. And understanding that complexity, that's key to navigating the digital age safely and responsibly. It's about moving beyond fear and embracing that nuanced reality of this, this often misunderstood realm.
Well said. So we've talked about the good, the bad, the downright scary side of the dark web. But there's another layer to this onion we haven't peeled back yet. The future. What's next for the dark web? Is it just going to keep growing? Are governments going to crack down harder?
Predicting the future of the dark web is kind of like, trying to predict the weather. Things can change quickly and unexpectedly.
So while we can't, predict the future exactly, can we at least identify some of the emerging trends? What's on the horizon for the dark web?
Well, one thing that's becoming pretty clear is that line between the surface web and the dark web, it's getting blurrier.
Blurrier? How so?
Well, think about social media for a second. Platforms like Facebook and Twitter, they were once considered, strictly surface web, but now they offer these features like encrypted messaging or anonymous groups. It's almost like they're bringing some of those aspects of the dark web, the anonymity, into the mainstream.
Interesting. So it's not just about these separate spaces anymore. It's about the blending of features and functionalities.
Exactly. And that raises some pretty big questions about, privacy and security and even, freedom of speech. When anonymity becomes more accessible, well, how do we make sure it's not being used for harmful purposes? How do we strike that balance between protecting privacy and combating crime? These are challenges that societies are really grappling with right now.
And as technology keeps evolving, I imagine those challenges are only going to get more complex.
Oh, absolutely. Another trend we're seeing is the increasing sophistication of dark web activities. The tools and tactics that cybercriminals are using they're constantly evolving, making it even harder for law enforcement to keep up. It's like a never-ending arms race, in the digital world.
So it's not just about hiding in the shadows anymore, right? It's about leveraging that cutting edge tech to stay ahead of the game for the good guys and the bad guys.
Precisely. And this is where things like artificial intelligence and machine learning, they're starting to play a much bigger role. Both sides are using these technologies to their advantage. Law enforcement agencies, they're using AI to analyze those huge amounts of data, track criminal activity, try to predict future threats. And then on the flip side, you've got cyber criminals using AI to automate their attacks, making them more efficient and harder to detect.
So AI it's both a potential solution and a potential problem. It's like a double-edged sword.
It is. And it really highlights how the future of the dark web is so closely tied to, the future of technology itself. As technology advances, so will the challenges and the opportunities presented by this, this hidden digital world.
So to bring this all back to our listeners, what does all of this mean for those of us who aren't, cybersecurity experts? How can we navigate this increasingly complex digital landscape safely and responsibly?
Well, this is where our deep dive, it kind of comes full circle. It all comes back to awareness,
Yes.
education, and taking those proactive steps to protect yourself, understanding that the dark web isn't just some, abstract, scary concept, but a real part of the digital world, a part that can impact you even indirectly. That's crucial.
It's about like knowing your enemy, even if you never actually face them, right?
Exactly. And the good news is there are resources out there, resources that can help you, stay informed and protected. We've talked about tools like Aura's dark web scanner, which can, alert you if your personal information has been compromised. But even beyond that, it's about staying informed, being critical of the information you encounter online, and just adopting, good cybersecurity practices.
So it's not about living in fear, right? It's about being empowered with knowledge.
Yeah.
And taking those steps to protect ourselves.
And absolutely. Knowledge is power.
Well said. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, from myth busting to exploring the good, the bad, and the downright scary parts of the dark web. I think we've given our listeners a pretty good overview of this hidden digital world and its impact.
It's been a fascinating journey, uncovering the origins, dissecting the complexities, and really thinking about the future of the dark web. I hope our listeners have come away with a better understanding of this often misunderstood realm.
Me too. And hopefully they've also come away with a sense of, empowerment, knowing that they can take control of their digital security and navigate the internet safely and responsibly.
Well, on that note, it seems we've reached the end of our deep dive, but the conversation, it doesn't have to end here.
That's right. Keep learning, keep questioning.
Yeah.
And stay safe out there in the digital world. And if you're curious to see if your information is lurking out there in the depths of the dark web, well, be sure to check out Aura's dark web scanner.
Until next time, keep diving deep.